I mentioned private as in the default type for a structure is public and the default type for a class is private. In our first example, we only had public, and so everything in our class was public. That's not the way we're typically going to create classes. We're going to have some parts that are public. Those are the parts that are needed to be public so that people can use our objects, and other parts that will be private so that we can be in control of what happens to them. And so as an illustration, we have changed the day of year here in display 10.4 to have some public member functions, one private member function, and all of the member variables are now private. And that is what we're going to recommend you use as kind of your template for creating classes. Make all of your member variables private, and make all of the member functions that are needed by other code public. However, if you make all of your member function or your member variables private, that means they cannot be changed by any code that's not part of your class. So I can't go around changing the member variables of a object that's created this way, which means we're going to have special functions to do that for us. And those are our mutator functions. Mutator functions typically are called by the name set, or they have set in the name. Also, since we can't get access to those private member variables, we'll need accessor functions to retrieve the values of those variables. And those typically will start with the word get. So if we change our code, have private member variables, you remember in our original code, we just directly changed the values of the day and month. Now we have to use the set function to set the day and month, or the month and day of our variable. And to retrieve values to compare to see whether they're the same or not, we have to use our get accessor functions to do that. And the reason that we make those private is so that we have control over what happens to those values, which is where the check date comes into play. The check date code, you'll notice, is making sure a month is between 1 and 12 and day is between 1 and 31. And if it's not within those values, it's going to reject whatever date we tried to set here. So, Ms. Hargrove, page 568. Number 15. Says, suppose your program contains the following class definition for the class automobile. It's got some public functions and it's got some private variables and a function. And in the main part of your program, you've got this declaration, automobile, Hyundai, and Jaguar. Which of the following statements would then be allowed in the main part of your program?
Jaguar not set price or underscore price.
Okay, set underscore price, so that means Hyundai dot price equals something would not be allowed, right?
No, it would not. It's a private function.
Because it's private, that's a private member, we can't alter it from the main body of our code. So can we do a price equals Jaguar dot get price?
Yeah.
Okay. And can we do a profit equals Jaguar get profit?
No.
No. Get profit is a private member function. So we can't do that with Jaguar or Hyundai. On the next page, we've got if Hyundai equal Jaguar, we're going to output, want to swap cars. Is that a legal thing to do?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay, so at least not by default. We can't do a comparison operation on objects. How about Hyundai equals Jaguar? Can we do that? Okay, this time we are allowed to do that. Even though we can't access the member variables ourselves, the assignment operation by default for a class will allow you to copy the contents of one class into another, and it has the effect of copying each of the individual private member variables from one object to the other. And they go into that a little more on the next page, 569. It is legal, and that's what happens. All right, so that's where we're going to leave off this week. I'm going to give you an assignment to help you get into the idea of using classes and objects that you create yourselves. Starting with self-test exercise number 14, except we're going to expand it a little bit. So you see in self-test exercise number 14, they want you to take display 10.4 and update it so that it doesn't allow illegal dates. And in fact, we're going to go a little bit farther than that. In assignment 10 for the box birthday calculator. So we're going to expand the day of year class to include the year, because we don't know whether a year is a leap year or not unless we know what year it is, right? And in addition to using all of the other rules, so knowing how many days each month has, for example, okay, January would have 31, February would have either 28 or 29. We know the number of days for all the months. February is a special case, and there are 3 rules that you need to implement in order to properly figure out whether whether the year is a leap year or not. So there's a 4-year rule. Typically, if the year is divisible by 4, it's a leap year, unless it is also divisible by 100, unless it is also divisible by 400. So if it's divisible by 4 but not 100, then it's a leap year. If it's divisible by 100, it's not a leap year. And if it's divisible by 400, even though it was divisible by 100, it is a leap year again. Once you've updated your class, your day of year class, you need to update the program so that's a date entered by the user. And that's going to include the year now instead of just the date, the month and day. it's still going to either announce happy birthday, Johann Sebastian, or happy unbirthday. If it is the birthday of Bach, then you should calculate how old he would have been on the date in question. And display it. And one more change that we're going to make in the sample program, if an invalid date is entered, it's just going to quit, abort the program at that point. Instead of aborting the program, I want you to report that you got an invalid date and do something about it, something appropriate. Let's see how I put it. Report the error and continue rather than aborting the program. So probably the appropriate thing to do would be, you've entered an invalid date, report that to the user and ask them to enter the date again. So an invalid date would be, it's a month that's outside the range of 1 to 12. It's a day that is not valid for that month. You could put some kind of constraint on year. And then for February, it's going to have 29 days for 4 and 400 year dates, but not 100 year dates. Otherwise, it's going to be 28 days. So what are we going to need to change in this program to make it work, to follow the rules of our homework?
We need to get the year.
We need to get the year. So we're going to need a new variable. We're going to need another get function. And we're going to need to change the set function to set the year, which means we're going to need to figure out what Bach's birthday, what year Bach was born, right? According to the internet, 1685, March 31st, 1685. Wait a second. This says March the 21st, 1685. I wonder who could be right. So if we go to Wikipedia, you will find out that March 21st is an old style date, and the 31st is a new style date.
What does that even mean?
Basically, it means the Julian year started on January 1st. because it didn't always throughout history. It's okay to use either date. Be sure and tell me which one you're using and why in your code. Or you could even make it work for both of them and say, happy old style birthday and happy new style birthday. In which case I would need another place to hold that. Okay, I would also need to change the set function itself, obviously. Now, the check date function is going to have to do something different. Can't just say illegal date, abort and exit.
Legal date, please enter. And the daily date.
Okay. Which would work fine if check date was only called when we were actually entering a new date. So think about that. Might be appropriate to set a flag that tells us whether the date entered was valid or not. Anyway, I'll let you think about that. As far as testing whether the day of the month is legal or not, what kind of a test do you think would be appropriate for that?
Hard one would be do one for each month.
Okay, yeah, that would be the hard way. What would be the easy way?
That probably just
Anything coming?
No, the only way I know the difference between the days was the little finger thing that you did in grade school, so I don't see how you would put it towards a program.
All right. And what does this finger day tell you? We know what the 31 day months are. January, March, May, July, August, October, and December.
And then 30 days for April, June, September, November. February.
And then February is a special case, right?
Right.
Seems to me like a switch would work well for this.
For February or all of it?
For the whole thing. Four, 6, 9, 11. Those are all my 30-day months, right? Phase 2 is going to be February. And then the default is going to be 31, right? So you're going to need some code in here to do the rules for February. Once you've figured out how many days your month is allowed to have, you can compare the day value to that max days value and either accept or reject it. Does that make sense to everybody? Do you have enough to get started? All right, so I've been asked for some help on our most recent homework. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the rest of our class period to work on this assignment if you want to. Anybody that needs help on this assignment or on a previous assignment, I can help you with that now. And if you choose not to work on it right now, you're free to go until next week. We have not finished Chapter 10 yet, so we will not have a quiz over Chapter 10 next week. But the box birthday calculator assignment will be due next week. Any questions? All right, that's it for the lecture for tonight, and I will open the Dropbox for this assignment, and if anybody needs help, stick around.